Welcome to Goldfish on Games and Cover Disc Face Off XL, where in August of 1991 the magazines only provided a single disc, but they tried their best to fill it. And those magazines are UK Amiga, Amiga Format, the One For Amiga, Amiga Action and Amiga Power. Fight! We start with Amiga Action, and on its single disc it provided two demos, with the first one being for Championship Athletics. Now you might think I've planned these things out, seeing that the Olympics have just finished, or at least by the time this video goes out, but I can assure you nothing would be closer to the truth. Because if I planned all this, then I doubt I would have picked this game, as I couldn't work out how to play it, as all the waggling in the world didn't help. So I had to go read the magazine, and it turned out you needed to put the stick in port 1. But after that, it then took a little bit of practice to be able to successfully do the pole vault, as you have to build up speed and then keep it, and then you have to know when to press the fire button to start lowering the pole. If you get it right, then you go flying, and I'm sure you end up off the mat each time as well. That's gotta hurt. The second event that they give us is the 100-meter hurdles, and this is also the typical waggle to get to speed, then pressing fire to jump over the hurdles, in which the AI players seem to have quite a lot of issues with. Is it normal for athletes to make it all the way to the Olympics to then fail this often getting over the hurdles? And is it just me, or did the artists only know how to draw three faces which they then used across the entirety of the crowd shots, as well as on the main commentator itself? This feels like a bit of an auto-ran with these type of games, and after playing the demo, I doubt I really would have played the full game. Let's move on to their other game demo, Little Boo. Not the best looking title on the Amiga, but it does have an art style that's very reminiscent of Wonder Boy, and I think it also apes some of its platforming style as well. More Wonder Boy in Monsterland than say the Dragon's Trap, as this does feel more like going from level to level than more the explorative nature of the other game. As we jump around stabbing various creatures to get pots, coins and other shiny objects, but you can charge up your weapon to do a stronger strike. I'm guessing as you go you'll increase the strength of this, as it only seems to cover half the bar, but that's going to be in the full game and not the demo. And those shiny things, well, they should also be usable, but they're not in this demo as well. And is it just me, or does that sound like a fart-powered jump? You only get one life for the demo and a very aggressive timer that will eat up some of your health when it hits 0. And the main aim, as far as I can tell, is to stab the baddies to find the key that will open the door. Overall, this seems a fine enough game. Nothing here is really screaming at me that I must play it. But if it was a game that I was given, then I would happily play it. But I don't think I ever would have requested it. Moving on to CU Amiga, it managed to pack a lot into that single disc, as we have a demo, 2 PD games, some Amos source code, and various utilities. And it launches with this simple menu, which is a step up from Amiga Action. In the background it's playing its tune of the month, which isn't too bad, and if you dig a little deeper you will find a picture of the month, which is of Freddy Krueger. Mostly following the order of the menu, we start off with Amolite, a horizontal shooter that just drops you right into the game. And this had to have been a Euro-based shooter, based on the fact that the first enemies take well over 6 shots to kill them. So your only real hope is to use the charge shot. And even with that, you're not even going to have any time to hit all of them. So it's mostly a case of just making yourself a path so you can get through. This is very much a learn the patterns and work out where you can sit, and try and dodge all the fire than trying to take on everything, because you're not going to have a chance to do that. But overall, this looks nice and scrolls smoothly, but wow, do they throw a lot at you from the start. And everything, including the background, will kill you in a single hit. Now there are power-ups, but you have to shoot them first to open them up, so that seems in keeping with the rest of this game. And of course, you will lose that when you die, which might be very quick after getting it. This is the type of game that gives the enemies the benefit of the doubt. Get a little too close to them and you're dead. Their bullets get a little bit too close to you, you're dead. But if your bullets get a little bit close to them, well, they deserve to last a bit longer, right? I've never been great at this type of game, and this one really is not doing it for me either. So it's definitely not one that I'll pick up and play again. I hope you're ready to be stumped with the second item, as it's Trek Trivia. And it does exactly what it says on the tin. It will ask you Star Trek related questions while the Enterprise flies along the bottom of the screen. And I think this would have been improved slightly if the background for the questions and the answers, well, if it was a little less textured. A simple colour would have made this a lot easier to read. But each time you get an answer right, the Enterprise will fly a little bit further across the screen. But you'll need to be good at your classic Trek trivia, as these questions can be quite obscure. And this is just the original series, no TNG, no movies. But you will get a chance to make a few wrong answers before it will end. But the further you get into the game, the more tokens that you'll get that will keep you around for a little bit longer. It's a simple but fun game if you happen to know your stuff. The next PD title is MM, which is short for Mastermind, a game that we've seen previously but done with a little bit more flair, and a slightly better UI. Our task is to work out the hidden codes by placing your coloured pegs into the numbered holes. You control this one by first selecting the colour, and then you can click on any of the numbered squares and you'll fill those in. There's also a few shortcut buttons that will help you fill out all in one go, or you can also start a new game. After placing your pegs, they will move over to the grid on the left hand side of the screen, and then a randomised set of results will show up next to it. A white peg means that you've got a colour right but it's in the wrong position. A dark grey means the peg is both right colour and right position, or nothing at all, then that peg wasn't any use. But because the results are randomised, where they show up in the grid doesn't match where the pegs are on the screen. So you'll have to try and infer the results and use logic to work out which ones are correct. It's a fun game that I would have played a lot because I really enjoyed these type of things. Well, until that better looking one came along anyway. Next up we get some Amos code that will play some music and then colour cycle an image with said music. The full source code, example images and music are included on the disc, so you can just load it up and experience the joy of disco lights. The final PD game for CU Amiga is Ping Pong, a 2-player only game that is actually a game of ping pong and not the expected pong. You move the bat around with the joystick and then will need to time the hits with the fire button. But with no animations on the bat, it's not particularly easy to tell what's going on, as there is a bit of time between hitting the fire button, making the ball fly, before you then have to hit it. The timing on the ball also feels a little weird, as you really have to wait for it to get near the bottom, and this is not made easy by the fact that the 2 players bat will hide the ball. So all in all, it's not a particularly great one to play. And I think me and my mates would have played this a few times, but it wouldn't have been in our main roster of games. And coming on to the utilities, we find Head Cleaner, or Scrubber as it likes to call itself in the program itself. Now this could actually be really useful now, as it's a program that will just spin up the drive and move the head. And why is this useful? Well, if you have a head cleaning disc like one of these, or one of these, then it will actually clean the head as it moves across the cleaning surface. Normally you'd have to boot up something and do a verify, and it would come out saying that it was all wrong, but you'll at least have known it cleaned the disc. With this, it'll just move it around, so it should give it a good scrub. The next program is Calc Key, that lets you summon a calculator with a keyboard combo. Useful if you're programming and you need to quickly work something out, but you can also take those results and paste them straight into the current running program. We have Virus X, a memory resident virus checker that when you put in a disk it will scan it, and then pop up a little box to tell you if it found anything. Not sure how useful it is now with how out of date the virus check will be, but it is a useful thing to have, as it seems viruses are actually getting passed around a lot more these days due to GoTech drives. Also included are the typical pp-more and pp-anim programs, but if you want a better disk formatter, then this has you covered. And that is pretty much it for CU Amiga, so let's move on to Amiga Power, that managed to stuff 2 games and 3 PD titles onto its disc. And the first demo is for Beast Busters, a rail shooter that's a port of the SNK Light Gun arcade game. Played with either the joystick or a mouse, it's just as you'd expect from a rail shooter on the Amiga. You move the cursor around and shoot at everything that shows up. There's some nice big zombies to hit, as well as some little devil dogs. You can play this either 1 or 2 players in the demo, and it's just the first level. And it's not a particularly long one either. It would actually take you longer to read the page in the magazine than it would to complete the level itself. Even with the slowdown that does happen when the train shows up and some of the larger sprites appear, I do feel that this might not be making the best use of the hardware, particularly when it comes to the shooting, as the fire is on the left click and grenades, they're on the shift keys. Not the right mouse button as you'd expect. Now I get that for the joystick, but you could have made allowances for the mouse. Now I might check out the arcade game as this looks like it could be a bit of fun, but I'm not particularly sold on the Amiga port. And Power's first PD title is Pharaoh's Curse, a port of the VIC-20 game, or at least according to the magazine. I've not played it before, but it does look like a VIC-20 game to me, graphically anyway. You start the game by having to head down into the tomb to find the treasures, that I'm sure is going to end up in a museum somewhere, right? Making this all harder are mummies and other things that will try to shoot at you, or at least try to touch you, and touch equals death. This is a multi-screen platform affair, similar to Jet Set Willy. And death will become quick and easy in this one. Hang around on a switch for 1 millisecond too long, and you'll get spiked. Walk into a room where there's a zombie just in the doorway, you're dead. Use the bird to fly somewhere else in the map, and it might drop you on a bad guy. But it is a large and interesting world to explore, and overall seems like quite the fun game. The second PD game is Maze Man, and it doesn't take much guesswork to tell what this game is based on. Yes, it's a Pac-Man clone, but giving it a home computer wars twist, as the enemies aren't ghosts, they're instead logos of other computers. We have Atari, IBM, and that thing that looks like a cherry is actually an apple. Collecting the power pellet will turn our Pac-like hero into a boing ball, and thus you can then eat up the other machines, all to the backdrop of some very basic sounds. graphically this isn't going to win any awards, and that extends to its originality. It has a few things from other pack clones like walls vanishing on later levels and slightly different mazes, but it is pretty basic, and I'm not sure this will be something that you would return to all that often. The final PD game of the magazine is simply named Dad, and this is a version of the Dad's Puzzle. Its simple goal is to get the blue box from the top left hand corner of the screen to the top right. And you have to attempt to do this by moving the blocks around into the empty squares. It's a pure logic puzzle game, and I've been playing around with this for quite a bit. Yes, it looks basic and it has a very simple premise, but if you have that right kind of mind, and if you don't already know the solution, it is a lot of fun to try and work it out. And the final demo for Amiga Power is The Executioner. A game that looks and sounds a bit like a Thrust style game, as we need to head into this planet and find a thing and then tractor it out. And it's a very lush looking medieval planet that we have to go around as well. But based on the blurb at the start, this sounds like it's a much deeper game than that, as we'll have to visit multiple worlds, all with its own different styles, as well as finding people and things to upgrade. I am a bit of a fan of these Thrust or Moonlander style games, and I'm stunned that I'd never heard of this game before, as it looks great. And amazingly for this demo, I really don't want to play it or put that much more time into it, as what I've already seen has interested me enough that I want to get the full thing. But back in the day, I would have played this quite a bit, as not only do we have to try and find the transmitter in each level, and then try and get out again, and thankfully we don't have to tractor it and have it hanging underneath us Thrust style, but there's also people for you to collect, and there's 2 levels for you to explore, that have these cool wraparound style maps. Now the items themselves are easy enough to find. The people, they're a lot more work, and typically hidden deep in the maps, with all sorts of things shooting at us, and yes, you can easily be hit by baddies that are off screen. But I've also found that there's switches that you can shoot and items that you'll have to deal with. This is a great demo, and I'm not kidding when I say that I've actually put in a saved eBay search for this game, because I want to get a boxed copy to review. Up next is Amiga Format, that like the other serious magazine, it had a single demo, 2 PD games, as well as some programs and other utilities. And let's start with the PD, with Jumper being the first one. And again, it's not a name that leaves too many options open for what it is. It's a colourful, if stilted version of Frogger, that went the extra mile when it came to sounds, as they had the ambience change depending on where you are. But I think they could have done a bit more work to make sure that frog didn't blend into the turtles, as it's very easy to lose where it is, more so when they're moving at the clip they are. It has some of the more advanced features of the game, like the turtles will dive down, but only once you hit the 3rd level, but it does seem to be missing the flies and other critters that would show up in the goal squares. Overall, this is a fun version of Frogger, but then it's difficult to make a bad version of Frogger, but we've seen better Froggers in previous episodes. The next title is one that we saw last month, and in a way, we've seen it just 9 minutes ago, as it's Cracker, which is another take on Mastermind. And this was the game that I was hinting at being better than MM. And I said that before even realising that this version was on the disc. Things just seem to keep lining up to make me seem more organised than I actually am. Just as in MM, you have to place the coloured pegs to work out the code. but this is styled more after the physical version of the game than what we've seen before, and I think it also plays a little bit better than that previous title, as it has a much better flow to it. And there's also some nice sound effects when you complete it. So if you had to pick one between the two of them, I'd go for this one, as I did enjoy playing it just that little bit more. Also included is a bunch of fun things, like the picture of the month. That's all very cool and moody. But we also have a fortune cookie program. That this version seems to be far less about the fortunes, as I think someone's just loaded it up with quotes from various famous people. There's also programs like Run Me, a basic menu where you can configure it to list different programs, and then you can select one to then start it up. It's a neat idea, but it being a pop-up I think limits the program slightly. A little bit more relevant is Text Engine, a text editor that adds some basic rich text elements like being able to bold or italic, but also has features like word counts. And I think this is definitely a step up from the basic built-in text editor. And it also would have been useful if you were writing up school projects, as it has the option to print. And what happens when you've deleted a file and you need to get it back? Well, you run Last Hope. That can scan a disk and attempt to find files that were deleted but not written over. So it will be a bit limited to getting back files that were just recently deleted, as it is very easy to overwrite a deleted file. But undelete programs have helped me in the past, so this would have been a useful tool to have around. And finally, let's move on to its only demo, which was for Megalomania. Now I have a bit of an admission to make. I've never really played Megalomania. I knew of it, and I know that it's very well regarded, but up to this point, this might be the most time that I've really put into the game. Which at its core is a God-style strategy game, as you have to give orders to your people, which might be to research new weapons or defences, and then place defenders in your castle to make sure that it is protected, as if you lose that, you lose the game, because you are up against at least one other computer player who will be trying to do the same thing, which is attempting to improve their own people.
The design's ready.
Now when I've played it more often than not, they end up attacking me, as I've been spending all my time trying to get the latest tech. But having a decent set of defenders can easily hold off an ill-equipped army, which means I get more time to make more people, which will equal more soldiers later on when I go on the attack. Being a sensible game, this has a very nice look to it, and it possibly might be one of the earlier examples of their small people art style. Now eventually your numbers will grow high enough and your tech will be advanced enough that you can attack your enemy. And with a large army you should do particularly well. And if you win that, then you can go play a second level, which does make for a nice challenge as you're up against multiple enemies at once. And having a couple of levels in a demo like this is really good, as there's a lot to get into. Because you're going to have to be very careful, because if you send your entire forces after one enemy, then the other one might try to blindside you and attack you while you're down. I can see why people really enjoyed this title, and I might have to put some real time into it myself.
The design's ready.
And the final magazine for the episode is the One For Amiga, that had just 2 demos. The first being for Graham Gooch's World Class Cricket. And any long-term watcher of this series will know, I do not have much interest in sports games. Which definitely continues to cricket. In the demo we get a chance to bat, so you'll have to pay attention to that little white box that will indicate where the ball is going to bounce. And then you have to pick which type of swing you want to do, with there being 8 different options. Get it right, the ball will go flying. Get it wrong and you'll lose a wicket. There isn't anything in the way of fielding or running. All else you get to do is have a go at the bowling, where you'll get to pick that box where the ball will bounce, and then you get to wiggle on the stick to try and set the speed and direction of the spin. Overall, this seems nice enough with some lovely presentational bits with the animations, but obviously, it's not for me. But the last demo of the month happens to be right up my street, as it's Rodland, a wonderful game that I've reviewed in the past. Yes, it's an arcade port, but it's a very well done port. It has all the charm of the original, with some lovely animations and all the weird creatures that obviously you get to bash and throw around with your magical rod. Because that is the aim of the game, to take out all the monsters in a level to head on to the next. But if you manage to collect all the flowers in a level, the creatures will change, and then will drop letters when they die instead. In the full title, that might get you an extra life. But in the demo, it's a little bit pointless, as they don't even show what you've collected so far. So instead, you'll just want to take out the regular enemies, as they will drop the items that will bounce around or explode, and be very useful. Not that you want to take out the baddies too quickly, as this is just a 3-level demo, and it won't take you long to complete it. And if you go on to play the full game, you will notice a few things are missing here. The music is quite obviously not around, but there's also no tickle, or the stunning of enemies when you bash one with the other. But it will whet your appetite for the full game. Also on this disc, they included some more replays for Kickoff 2, but when you've seen one of them, you've seen pretty much all of them, so we won't go over them right now. And with that, we have checked out the magazines. And so what jumped out at me in this episode? What would I recommend? Well, in third place, I'm going to say Megalomania. Hadn't really played this one before, but I see why people found it so interesting, so I'll have to invest more time into it. Second place, I'm just going to go with Rodland. It's a lovely game and I enjoyed playing it so much, even if that demo is way too short. But it did show people what made this a great title. And in first place, well, it had to be The Executioner. Yeah, the name might be bad, as it doesn't really seem to fit in with the aesthetics of the demo. But it was a great demo, and I just can't wait to play the full thing. So, do you agree with me? Do you have anything else to say? Well, leave me a message in the comments, or come and join us on the Discord. We are a very friendly bunch over there. And until next time, I was the Goldfish, that was a mixed but interesting bunch of discs, and this was Goldfish on Games. Thanks for watching. I do hope you enjoyed this video, as I really do enjoy looking at all these magazines and finding games that I had no idea about. And if that appeals to you, then you should find some links on the screen right now, or you can subscribe to the channel to find out when new videos go live.